NSFW, which is the dirtiest joke you know. A husband goes to work while the wife cleans the house and cooks food. A man knocks on her door and asks the woman, "Do you have a vagina?" The woman, shocked, slams the door. The next day, the same man comes and asks the same question with the same result. Third day, the woman gets creeped out, and after their conversation she calls her husband and says, "A creepy man keeps asking me about my vagina. Can you come home tomorrow early?" The husband agrees, and the next day he tells her, "Answer his questions with yes and see what happens. I'll be next to you to not see me." The man comes the fourth day and the conversation goes like, "Do you have a vagina?" "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Good. Then tell your husband to stop using my wife's." Three little ducks walk into a bar. The bartender turns to the first one and say, "Hey, what's your name?" "Huey," came the reply. "Well, Huey, how has your day been?" "Fantastic. Been in and out of puddles all day." "What else could a duck want?" "Satisfied." The bartender turns to the second duck. "Say, what's your name?" "Louie." "Well, Louie, how has your day been?" "Fantastic. Been in and out of puddles all day." "What else could a duck want?" Catching on, the bartender turns to the last duck and says, "Let me guess, you're Dewey, right?" And the duck, batting her eyelashes, says, "No, I'm Puddles." Reminds me of one that Israel Kamikawa once stopped playing to tell in the middle of a gig. A duck is on trial. The judge asks him his name and what he was arrested for. "Your Honor, my name is Quack, and I was arrested for blowing bubbles in the pond in the park." The judge figures this is a minor crime, so he lets him off with 2 weeks community service, and moves on to the next case, also a duck. "Your Honor, my name is Quack Quack, and I was arrested for blowing bubbles in the pond in the park." Same species, same crime, same sentence, 2 weeks public service. Next case. When the third consecutive duck walks in, the judge says, "Let me guess, your name is Quack Quack Quack." "No, Your Honor, my name is Bubbles." A man washes up on a desert island after a shipwreck. The only other survivors are a dog and a pig. There are plenty of resources on the island, so he doesn't have to eat them. After a few weeks of solitude, though, he begins to get lonely. He decides the pig would be closer to a human, so he tries to have sex with it. Every time he does, though, the dog attacks him, fouling his attempts. This goes on for months until, finally, his prayers are answered and a beautiful woman washes up on the beach. They get to know one another, and finally one day he gets the courage to ask her, "You know, I've been here a long time and I've gotten very lonely. If I ask, will you do something for me?" She says, coyly, "Of course, anything you ask." "Perfect. Will you hold that dog while I fuck that pig?" When I was, about 6 years old, I read this joke in a dirty joke book my mother and stepdad had for some reason. And when I was, about 6 years old, I decided that I would tell this joke loudly at the Denny's in Knoxville, Tennessee, to the utter horror of my mother, stepfather, 2 aunts, cousin, and everyone in a 3-table radius. A teacher asked the class why divorce existed. Student 1 answered because someone cheated. The teacher says, "Very well." Student 2 replies with, "Because they don't love each other no more." Student 3 says, "Because of diarrhea." The teacher is perplexed and tells the student to explain. Student 3 responds with, "My mom tells my dad if his shit doesn't get hard she's going to divorce him." Teacher is asking the kids what their parents do for a living, and little Timmy pipes up, "My dad is a stripper at the gay club across town. Sometimes if a customer really like him they go into the alley out back and he makes extra money." The teacher is of course mortified and quickly moves on to the next child, but asks Timmy to speak with her after class. She starts to speak with him about his father's questionable job when he interrupts her and says, "Don't worry teacher, that's not really his job. I just made that up because I was too embarrassed to say what he really does." Taken aback, the teacher asks what he really does. "He plays shortstop for the Orioles, or substitute whatever local and or shitty team and position makes the joke work for you." A guy tells his wife, "Honey, I'm taking you and the dog fishing today." She responds with, "Well, I don't want to go fishing today, can't you go by yourself?" He says, "I'll give you 3 options. You can go fishing with me, you can give me a blowjob, or you can let me fuck you in the ass. She thinks about it and goes, alright, I'll give you a blowjob. She starts sucking his dick and gags. She exclaims, your dick tastes like ass. The husband responds with, yeah, the dog didn't want to go fishing either. Easily the dirtiest joke I've ever been told. A couple with a young son live in an apartment in New York City. One afternoon, they're feeling horny, but they have to find a way to keep their son distracted while they're having sex. So mom gives him a popsicle and tells him to stand on the balcony and tell them what he sees outside. While mom and dad are going at it, they hear their son say, there's a blue car getting towed. Some homeless guy is on the corner begging people for money. The lady next door is out jogging. The Andersons are having sex. Mom and dad stop what they're doing. How do you know that? Mom asks. Can you see them? No, he replies. Billy's out on the balcony eating a popsicle. A rich man and a poor man have the same wedding anniversary. They're both at Madison Avenue shopping for their wives. Poor man says to the rich man, what did you get your wife this year? He says, a Mercedes and a huge diamond ring. The poor man says, why'd you get her both? The rich man says, if she doesn't like the ring, she can take it back to store in her new car, come home and still be happy. The poor man says, oh, okay, that works. The rich man says, well, what did you get your wife? The poor man says, a pair of slippers and a dildo. The rich man says, why'd you get her a pair of slippers and a dildo? The poor man says, if she doesn't like the slippers, she can go fuck herself. I met an older woman at a bar last night. She looked pretty good for a 60-year-old. In fact, she wasn't too bad at all, and I found myself thinking she probably had a really hot . We drank a couple of beers, and she asked if I'd ever had a sportsman's double. What's that? I asked. It's a mother and daughter threesome, she said, as my mind began to embrace the idea, and I wondered what her daughter might look like. I said, no, I have an apostrophe T. We drank a bit more, then she said with a wink, tonight's your lucky night. We went back to her place. We walked in. She put on the hall light and shouted upstairs, Mom, you still awake? Edit. I know I sound like every Redditor who has ever lived, but thank you for the gold. My puny unoriginal joke is completely unworthy of such an honor. A guy walks into a bar alone and asks the bartender for a drink. The bartender serves him and asks him if he wants to make a couple extra bucks, and the guy asks what he has to do. The bartender says, well, you see the really big fella over there? He owes me some money and I need you to collect it. There's also a dog outside that howls all night and keeps me up. I think it has a sore tooth and I need you to pull it. Finally, my sister is upstairs and she hasn't been with the man since putting on 100 pounds, so I need you to sleep with her. The guy says give me another beer and I'll think about it. The bartender keeps serving him and getting the guy more and more drunk. Finally the guy is pretty drunk and says to the bartender, I'll do it. Don't tell Tiny over there, but I'm going to knock him out and take his wallet. The guy gets up from the bar stool, taps the big guy on the shoulder and bam! Knocks him out cold. Then he storms off into the alley and the bartender hears the dog growling and then whimpering. The guy comes back into the bar all bloody with his clothes torn to shreds and says, where's your sister with the sore tooth? A teacher asked her students to use the word fascinate in a sentence. Mary raised her hand. The animals at the zoo are fascinating. That's great, said the teacher, but I'm looking for fascinate. Sally raised her hand. I was fascinated by the exhibits at the museum. Good, said the teacher. What again? I'm looking for fascinate. Little Johnny raised his hand. The teacher hesitated since Little Johnny was known for being vulgar, but she decided to give him a chance. Okay, Johnny, the teacher said, share your sentence with us. My sister has a sweater with 10 buttons, said Johnny, but her tits are so fucking big she can only fasten 8. A guy goes into this bar, sits down and orders a drink. While waiting, he sees a guy sitting at the bar who has a very big muscular body but a little tiny head. So, he asks the guy, how is it that you have such a huge body and a small head? The guy replied, I was walking along the beach one day and I came across this bottle buried halfway in the sand, so I picked it up. brushed away the sand, and out popped this fine female genie. She said she would grant me 3 wishes for releasing her. For my first wish, I asked for $10 million, and poof, right there on the sand was $10,000,000,000. For my second wish, I asked for a luxury yacht, and poof, right there on the ocean was a 90-foot yacht. Finally, for my third wish, I asked to have sex with the genie, but she said that genies were not allowed to indulge in that kind of activities. So, I said, come on, how about a little head joke? So a family goes to the zoo and the little boy is confused. Mom, what's that thing hanging from the elephant? His trunk? No. The other end, his tail? No. Underneath she sees he meant the elephant's penis. She blushes and says, oh, that's nothing. The little boy still confused. Hey, Dad, what's that thing hanging underneath the elephant? Oh, that's his dick. Why did Mommy say it was nothing? She's just spoiled. A guy runs into the bar and says, barkeep, 4 shots of vodka. He then pounds all 4. The bartender says, why the 4 shots? Just had my first blowjob. Well, in that case, let me get you another shot on the house. No thanks. If 4 didn't kill the taste, the 5th won't matter. A priest is getting his tires rotated and he wants to make sure it's done, so he asks the mechanic, did you tighten all the lug nuts? Sure, padre, tighter than a nun's pussy. Oh, give them a few more turns. There's a woman pregnant with triplets going to the bank to take out a loan to help pay for her children's baby supplies. Suddenly a robber runs in with a gun and demands everyone to put their hands up. The pregnant lady refuses and he shoots her 3 times in the stomach, hitting each child. She's rushed to hospital and miraculously all 3 children survived, including the mother. One day when the kids were all teens, one of them knocks on their mother's door and asks to speak to her. He says, Mom, when I was peeing a bullet came out, and she tells him the story of the time in the bank. The next day another kid knocks on her door and says the same thing. The mom tells him the story too. The third day, the final kid knocks on her door and asks to speak with her. Before he can speak, his mom says, were you peeing and see a bullet come out? The boy says, no, I was having a wank and shot the dog. Timmy was having a bad dream. So he got out of bed and walked to his parents' bedroom. Timmy looks in his parents' room, and there's Dad, giving it hot and heavy to Mom. Mom stops when she sees him, and Timmy runs away. Dad says, I'll go talk to Timmy. Dad walks down the hall and into Timmy's room, where he finds Timmy, giving it hot and heavy to Grandma. Timmy turns and looks at his dad and says, not so funny when it's your mother, is it? For the life of me I can't remember where I heard this one. A couple of researchers contacted a zoo to ask if they could record gorillas mating, to be used at a primate conference. The zoo administrators agreed and the date was set for the following week for them to come and record as the female was in heat. The 2 researchers showed up with their equipment on the day and were greeted by one of the zoo personnel who informs them that the male gorilla had passed away. The researchers were crushed. As they are all standing there with glum moods, the zoo official spies a janitor walking by and has an idea. He quickly talks to the researchers and they all agree. The zoo official approaches the janitor and explains the situation. He then asks the janitor the important question, would he have sex with the gorilla for $5,000? The janitor thinks it over a minute and says he will do it, so they let him into the cage. They start filming. There is a lot of screaming, yelling, grunting and crying, and finally it is over. The janitor walks out, covered in cuts and bruises and pretty dazed. One of the researchers yells out that the camera wasn't working correctly and they would need to do it again. They ask him if he would do it again because the cameras were screwed up. He thinks about it for like 10 minutes, deep in thought, and then responds, I have to decline. I just don't think I could afford paying another $5,000. Reminds me of this one. A man is sitting alone in a bar at the end of the night when the bartender comes up to him and says, hey, you wanna see something cool? The man agrees and the bartender takes him to a dimly lit room in the back. There's a gorilla chained up in the corner of the room, and the bartender takes a baseball bat and slams the gorilla in the back as hard as he can. The gorilla wakes up, unbuckles the man's pants and starts sucking his dick. After the bartender finishes, he says to the guy, you wanna try now? The guy says, okay, but you don't have to hit me that hard. A bus of nuns crashes and they end up in line at the pearly gates with St. Peter. St. Peter asks the first nun in line if she'd ever broken her vow of celibacy as a nun. The first nun went, "Well, one time I did touch a man's thing, but only with the tip of my index finger." St. Peter pointed her to a baptismal fount full of holy water and said, "Dip your fingertip in the fount and you may enter the gates of heaven." First nun does so. The gates swing open with the choir of angels welcoming her. Second nun comes up. St. Peter asks again the same question. Second nun admits she gave a man a handjob. St. Peter then says, "Dip your hand in the fount and you may enter the gates of heaven." Suddenly a nun in the back of the line rushes forward, pushing the third nun out of the way. St. Peter asks why she's rushing so much. The nun says, "I want to gargle the water before Sister Mary her puts her asshole in it." Guy walks into a bar and sees a sign behind the bar saying free drinks all night to anyone who can make my horse laugh. So the guy walks over to the bartender, asks him where's the horse. Is the bartender walks him out back to the stable and watches him whisper something to the horse, and sure as shit the horse starts laughing. Next day the guy comes back and the sign has been changed, free drinks all night to anyone who can make my horse cry. So the man walks out back and when he comes back and the horse is crying, bartender astonished pours the man a drink and says, "I just have to know, what do you say to make him laugh?" Guy replies, "Ugh, that was easy, I just told him I had a bigger cock than him." Bartender asks, "And to make him cry?" "Oh well, I proved it to him. I've been to that bar. Their mascot is an alligator they keep in the alley. There's a one-eyed lady who lives upstairs in room 318 and gives blowjobs for $10. She's just across the hall from this old lady who is constantly trying to talk people into a mother-daughter threesome. One night I'm there and this guy comes in claiming he just got back from being stuck on an island with a dog and a pig. I ask him what he did before the island. He says he worked briefly as a gynecologist and had a side hustle as a pizza man but quit both jobs to sail the fresh air of the seas. He sees the sign that reads free drinks for anyone who can make my horse laugh. He questions, "How do you make a horse laugh?" I reply, "You'll have to ask the three-legged guy at the end of the bar." He sees a sign right beside that one which reads free drinks for anyone who can beat the challenge. I lean over and explain, "The bar's mascot, the alligator, has a sore tooth. You have to go pull the tooth." He thinks for a minute and says, "There's a lot I won't talk about from the island but I think I can pull that tooth." I continue, "But that's not all. The lady upstairs gives amazing blowjobs and has a lovely singing voice but she's never had an orgasm. You have to make it right for her." The island man quickly declines. "I'll pay for my drinks." Some time passes and he's become somewhat intoxicated and is running low on cash. Bartender, I accept the challenge. First the alligator, then somebody tell that lady to send little Johnny out on the balcony with the popsicle. The bartender rings a bell and the bar quiets in anticipation. The island man stumbles toward the alley door to find the mascot. Someone exclaims, "He's gonna do it." Next thing the whole bar hears is banging, clanging, trash cans knocked around, a holler and yell, and then silence. Then the island man, looking a bit rough, emerges through the door and slurs, "Now where's the lady with the tooth?" A penguin from Antarctica decides to take a vacation and visit someplace hot. He decides to visit the southwestern United States. He rents a car and is driving through New Mexico in July when suddenly the rental makes some awful noises. He pulls into a small town with an auto repair garage. He talks to the mechanic and the mechanic says to come back in 15 minutes. Having some time, he decides to stop into the local ice cream shop. Since he's a penguin and he's really hot right now, he orders a huge bowl of vanilla ice cream. It's cold and delicious, but since he's a penguin and only has flippers, he makes a big mess of things. He's covered in ice cream. 15 minutes have passed and he goes back into the garage. The mechanic looks up from underneath the hood of the car and says, "It looks like you blew a seal." The penguin replied, "No, number, it's just ice cream. My ex used to tell me one," he said. "I'm the only person to have understood it to the point of laughter. It goes like this. A sadist is sitting at a bar having a drink, when a masochist walks in and sits next to them. They get to chatting about sex and the sadist says, 'Oh, you see, I am a sadist. I love to inflict pain on other people." The masochist raises their eyebrows in interest and says, "Oh, what a coincidence. I'm a masochist, and I love having pain inflicted upon me." After some more talking, the sadist says, "Shall we go back to my place so that we can have a bit of fun?" And the masochist eagerly agrees to go. So now they're back at the sadist's place, with the masochist tied to the bed. The sadist had to change into something more appealing. Once he comes back to the bedroom, whip in hand, leather suit on, and the masochist looks at them eagerly waiting to be struck. After so much waiting, the masochist finally and excitedly says, "Are you going to strike me with your whip?" The sadist tilts their head back with laughter and goes, "Ah ha ha ha. No, ETA. Thanks for my first awards ever." Strangers smile. "I woke up feeling pretty shitty. This made me feel nice."